We'll just have a look at what the heck. Anyways, we're just going to get started here, you guys. What we'll do is I'm just going to discuss with you guys a couple of, there's probably about 10 or 12 points that I want you guys to bear in mind when you are bringing a client through a pre-sale. This is kind of weird because, you know, when you normally teach this class, like you're in front of people, you can see them interacting, and this, I kind of feel like I'm just looking, I'm just talking to myself like a crazy person in the mirror. So anyways, we'll move forward here. So first thing that I want to discuss with you guys is just your role when you are in a pre-sale environment, when you're representing a buyer in a pre-sale. This is not a resale environment where your primary role is to get the absolute best deal for your client. Most pre-sale sites, including all of mine, there's no negotiation. It's all fixed pricing, and we have our own contracts. So your guys' role as buyer's agents is a lot different in that environment. And I think that understanding the differentiation is extremely important for you guys to serve your buyers. And you know, the best realtors that we deal with that keep coming back to our sites are the ones that really understand that really well. So because you guys aren't drafting these contracts of purchase and sale, you need to really read these contracts. That's the number one thing. You are not there to, you know, score your client a free laminate upgrade. Okay, as good as you might think that makes you look. What you're there to do is to ensure that your client understands everything that they're agreeing to. Now, in most cases, if you're selling a strata and there's more than 4 units and it's brand new, the Real Estate Development Marketing Act is going to apply. And so what that means is that your client is going to be entitled to a 7-day right of rescission. So you go into a Polygon site, you come into one of my sites, you know, provided there's more than 4 units, it's stratified, there's a disclosure statement. You don't need to read through that contract before your clients sign it. The Real Estate Council would probably lose their minds if I was here telling you that. But the fact of the matter is, you should read through it, but you don't have to read through it in the excruciating detail that you actually should before the client signs it. I'll put it that way. You should have a basic understanding of what the client is agreeing to, but the thing is that you have a 7-day right of rescission, and it's not like a subject removal period where you have to make a bona fide good faith attempt to remove subjects on your deal. This is a right of rescission. If your client does not like the weather outside on the 7th day, they can cancel their contract. They don't need a reason. It doesn't have to be justified or anything. So it's during that time where, you know, we expect the realtors to be reading and digesting and understanding everything that's in that contract of purchase and sale. These contracts are extremely complex because of the fact that you were dealing with a product that isn't built yet. So it's extremely important that you guys understand all of the contingencies, all of the changes that could occur that are contained in this contract. You know, I can't stress enough how often we get realtors that are complaining about different components of these contracts when they're enforced. And we have to, you know, Danielle, who's not licensed, has to refer them back to things in the contract that their clients agreed to, that they were supposed to have understood and explained to their clients. So, and it's not just with us, with just about anywhere you go, there's absolutely no sympathy for realtors that do not read and understand this stuff. So, you know, get out thesaurus.com, develop a good relationship with a lawyer like Stu Ross. Anytime I contact Stu with a question, he always gets back to me super fast. And, you know, he's always available. Like he's an incredible guy. So develop a good relationship with a guy like Stu Ross or Gardner Harris there, or with, you know, Tony Spagnuolo's office was always great with that kind of thing as well. Okay. I want you guys to understand that these clauses are interpreted very literally, and they're as important to the contract as the price is to your client. Okay, so you really need to understand what your clients are agreeing to. Things like the end date, what happens if materials that they saw in the showroom are unavailable when it comes time to install them, that kind of thing. We'll touch on that a little later. This might not be applicable now, but given the state of the market, but in most cases, don't go in trying to ask for money off. The developers aren't going to do it. The couple of grand that a buyer would save adds up to hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of a site if they're doing that for everybody, right? So, and please do not try to get a free parking stall out of the developer. Aside from the elevators, the parking stalls are the most expensive part of the building per square foot to build. In Port Coquitlam here, for every individual parking stall a developer has to build, it's about $25,000, and we cannot sell them for 25 grand in POCO. And we have to include one with every unit. So they're already salty about the insane amount of parking that the suburban municipalities make them build. Don't try to get a free one, okay? We're going to talk about warranty here, 2510. 2510 basically works like this. So the important parts to your client is that you, it actually should be called like a 12510. So at the end of the first year, and that clock starts ticking when your client takes possession. Okay, that's material and workmanship on everything within the unit itself. Okay, so nail pops, there'll be cracks in the drywall, especially with a wood frame building. That building's actually going to shrink by about an inch in either direction during the first year as all of the lumber dries out. So there will be nail pops, there will be drywall cracks. The seams in the molding will crack, right? My brand new house in Maple Ridge, almost every seam in the crown molding cracked during the first year. So, you guys, with modern technology, I mean, it's super easy. When your client's completion date was, send yourself an email, hit the snooze button on it for, 11 months, and then make sure you're contacting them and that they're reporting those deficiencies before the 12-month period is up, because they're not going to remember. Most builders, of course, aren't going to solicit. They're not going to call and say, hey, is there anything we can come fix in your unit for you? They're not going to do that, right? So, just make sure you're reminding your client to get those deficiencies in. Okay. I can't see the chat, by the way, guys, but if there are questions in there, we'll answer them at the break or something like that. Okay. The 2-year materials and workmanship, that applies, I believe, from the first, the date of the first possession. That's when that clock starts ticking for the common property. So all the nail pops, drywall cracks, all that kind of stuff for the common property, that clock starts ticking after the first possession. So that's more of a strata corporation thing and the property manager. You guys don't have to worry about that kind of thing. 5 years is the mechanical components of the building and the rain screening. So a diligent strata, and it may be something you want to advise your clients on. It will, before that 5 years is up, hire an envelope engineer, hire somebody to have a look at these components of the building, make sure they're performing the way that they should. It's not that rain screening is only designed to last 5 years. It's the reason that the warranty is for 5 years is because that's probably the maximum amount of time that if there were deficiencies, it would take for the deficiencies to show up, right? So it could take 2-3 years for those deficiencies to show up. So that's why the warranty period is for 5 years. And then 10 years is structural, and same thing. It's not that a parkade structure is only supposed to last 10 years. It's that it could easily take 10 years for structural deficiencies to show up. Okay. Arranging a mortgage for your client. I cannot stress this enough. Most developments, including all of mine, there will be an on-site rep. We only use TD for this. There will be an on-site rep that will get your clients approved, and they'll guarantee the rate, they'll guarantee the funding of the mortgage from the day you write your deal until completion. So it's not like a 90-day, 120-day. We'll reverse engineer how long that approval is for, based on how long we think it'll take to build the building. Okay. With TD, the reason we only use TD is that the only reason that those mortgages will not fund, and we've gone up several tiers in management to ask this question, because of the guarantee we're offering at Liberty right now, where if your mortgage doesn't fund, you get your deposit back, is that that mortgage is guaranteed to fund. And unless you committed fraud on your application, or someone dies that's on the application, or you actively try to frustrate that application. So like you're calling TD and tell them, you know, you got laid off, or you're going to refuse to pay your mortgage or something like that, that mortgage will fund. That's extremely important. I can't tell you how many people we've, we're dealing with right now that had the opportunity to get these mortgages and they didn't do it for whatever reason. And now they're crying in their beers, and they're coming to us asking for extensions. They're coming to us asking for breaks on assignment fees because they can't complete. And it's, there's just not a ton of sympathy there for them, because they had that opportunity so early on, before this whole COVID thing happened. So get that mortgage approved. It will be at a higher rate than what's being offered out there, but it's guaranteed to fund. It's a safety net. Okay. If your clients change their address, it is in most cases, it's their responsibility to provide that to the pre-sale team. So make sure that you're doing that, document that you're doing it, because sometimes important notices are sent by mail. We don't send anything by mail. It's not the 1800s, but some guys do. I don't know. Maintenance fee. So there are penalties in the Real Estate Development Marketing Act for guys that drastically undershoot their maintenance fees. So you can't just like run around saying you're going to have 1,000 square foot condo with $150 a month maintenance fee. But if you are kind of feeling like maybe the maintenance fees they're advertising are a little bit light, a very simple solution is to look at similar size townhomes or condos to what your client is looking at buying, that are, 1, 2, 3, 4 years old kind of thing. In this environment right now, with this changes to all of the insurance costs, you're going to want to make sure that complex has, what I call the insurance bump. So everybody's insurance costs are going up. Make sure that the maintenance fees that you're using as a comparison are representative of a maintenance fee that has had the insurance bump already, right? There are a couple of caveats with that. So if your client is buying an extremely large unit that is not typical of the development, so most of the development, imagine, is 500 square foot and 750 square foot units, and your client's buying a 1,000 square foot suite, you need to compare that 1,000 square foot suite with a complex that is kind of made up the same way. So what happens in these complexes is, there's a 75% vote on a new budget. Well, the 25% or 10% of the building that have huge units, their maintenance fees go up like crazy a lot of the time, because their votes don't really count. The majority of the people with the smaller units are looking at what their maintenance fees look like. Okay, so if you're buying, again, Liberty would be a perfect example. The entire complex is 2,400 to 2,700 square foot townhomes, right? So don't compare those maintenance fees with a complex that's, the majority of them are 1,400 square feet, and then there's just the odd one that's 2,700. Okay. This is an important one, you guys. So with our marketing material, we use the draft strata plan from the disclosure statement. So if you come into one of our sites and you see on the marketing material that it's a 650 square foot unit, it's a 650 square foot unit according to the strata plan. Most marketers and most developers do not do that. What they do is they use the architectural drawings. The architectural drawings will almost always show a little bit bigger. And the reason being is that a strata plan is always halfway into the wall to halfway into the wall. Whereas construction drawings, an exterior wall, they'll measure the outside of the exterior wall in to halfway into a party wall, right? So you can imagine 1,000 square foot corner unit, that extra half a foot all the way up one side and then all the way up the front of it is going to add some extra square footage to the unit. We've seen differences, 40, 50 square feet, which again isn't a huge deal as long as the client knows it in advance. So the solution there is just during that due diligence period, cross-reference the marketing material with what's in the disclosure statement, or better yet, prep the client for that before they write the deal. Okay, just so you know, this unit's probably actually a little bit smaller than what we're talking about here. Okay. A Form J. So Form J rental disclosure statement. This is an extremely important thing that you guys want to look at as realtors, especially if you're buying in a building, your client's buying in an apartment building. So obviously, we want to protect our clients. We want to make sure that they're going to have the most options possible. We want to make sure that the Form J says 100 years. And what the Form J is it sets out how long essentially rental restrictions will be unenforceable for. So if you have 100 years on that Form J, and at the first annual general meeting, the Strata Council votes to ban rentals, great. Well, they can ban rentals all they want. That ban doesn't take effect for 100 years. So that's what you're looking for apartment buyers, or not. I mean, maybe your clients don't want to buy in a building that's going to have a bunch of rentals in it. I don't know. But it's just something to look at. That Form J will supersede any bylaws that are made by the Strata Corporation. Okay. Building permit in place and financing in place. These are two big ticket items that you guys need to be aware of. Okay. So we've talked about the 7-day right of rescission that your client is entitled to as soon as they enter the contract. Now the wording in the act is very clear. It's from the day they enter the contract. Okay, so not the day you sign. You sign on a Saturday, you don't get the contract back until the Monday. The clock doesn't start ticking until the Monday. Okay, but there are other reasons that a 7-day right of rescission can come up. If there was a substantial change to your client's unit, or if there was a substantial change to a piece of common property. So you're promised, one of those big polygon clubhouses with a pool, and now all of a sudden you're getting a garden shed with a dartboard or something. That would likely be that would likely trigger your client's right of rescission over again. When we market these developments, the vast majority of the time, we don't have a building permit and we don't have financing in place to actually build the building. We can market with something called a development permit. So that's where you're telling the city what you're going to build. It's a relatively inexpensive set of drawings. Building permit is where you tell the city how you're going to build it. And that's where all the consultants and engineers and all that kind of stuff are involved. And that's a very, very expensive set of drawings. So, but without a building permit and without financing, we can only market the development for 9 months. At the 9-month mark, if we don't have financing and a building permit, we have to cease marketing. And at the 1-year mark, if we still don't have those things in place, all of the buyer's rights of rescission restart, and they don't end until the day that we inform them that we have both of those things. So I've had situations in the past where, we had our disclosure run out, and when you hear disclosure run out, that's typically what it means, because the cities were taking too long with the building permit. And so we've marketed this development, spent boatloads of the developer's money, spent a whole bunch of time and effort, and the 1-year mark hits, and you got 75% of the development sold out. Any one of those people at any time could rescind their offer, walk away, get their deposit back, and there's nothing we could do. So for you guys as realtors, if you've ever sold your client into something And you're driving by, you're watching this thing, and you're wondering what exactly is happening. It doesn't look like they're getting it off the ground. They may not have the financing in place. We have to sell typically about 50% of a development before the bank will lend a penny to actually get a shovel in the ground. Okay, and that's why those protections are in place for your buyers. So if a year goes by and you haven't been notified that they have a building permit and financing in place, you can protect your buyers, let them know what their options are, kind of thing. Okay. This is one that I really want to express to you guys, and we put it in every single extension letter, but for some reason it doesn't sink in, or I don't know what it is. Do not tell your clients to please do not give notice to their landlords until they physically have the keys for their new unit in their hands. Okay. Most of the time, most pre-construction contracts, that completion notice is given in anticipation of the developer getting their occupancy permit and having titles ready. They don't issue those completion notices once they have those things in their hands. Okay, because it costs thousands of dollars a day to carry that building once it's complete. So those completion dates can change on a dime, especially for a condominium complex, right? So I've stood in driveways with buyers where I had one situation where the wife was literally 9 months pregnant, and these people were homeless because their realtor told them, yeah, go ahead and give notice to your landlord. And lo and behold, we didn't get occupancy, and completion got extended. And those changes can happen up to 1, 2, 3 days prior to the completion date. So I know it sucks to pay the extra $1,500, $1,800 that month for rent, but I can't tell you how many times people trying to line up those dates perfectly has backfired. Okay. Insurance. I haven't been a resale realtor for a very long time, but when it was established practice to ensure that our clients had insurance for the completion date, especially in a strata where the deductibles on the strata corporation's insurance can be $20,000, $25,000. If you absolutely need to have that in place for your clients. You need to advise them to have that in place. So we had a situation recently where the realtor didn't advise his clients to do that. And while they were some of the first people to move into this building, and what happened? Well, their locker got broken into. A couple of really expensive mountain bikes got taken. I think they claim to have had a laptop in there, which that doesn't make any sense to me, but whatever. Got taken as well. So these people are out a few $1,000s, and they didn't have insurance. And I said to the realtor, this is the least of what could have happened. If there had been a flood that had come from inside of their unit, and the strata corporation's insurance deductible was $25,000, they'd be out that money. So be grateful this is the worst that happened. Of course, he didn't see it that way, and for some reason thought that the developer should pay for it, but neither here nor there. Okay, so I'm going to try to find the chat here just to kind of catch up on any questions that have come through, and I may need to go find Carla. Oh, there we go. What is the warranty on the appliances? So appliances are not warranted by the developers. They're warranted by the individual manufacturers. Now, the warranty on those appliances will start when the appliances are delivered. Okay, it doesn't start when your client takes possession. So don't try to time that out for 1 year from the possession date, because the warranty will be expired. So again, same thing, send yourself an email, hit the snooze button on it for 10 months, 11 months, and remind yourself to contact the client, because most manufacturers, it'll be a 1-year warranty. Jennifer Morgan, I don't know why I needed to read her name, but is there a price per square foot for maintenance that is standard, like 30 cents a square foot? No, it's completely dependent on the expenses of the strata corporation, what that all looks like. With a clubhouse, it could be way up there. If you have a lot of green space, the price per square foot could be way up there. And different locations have different strata fees that are typical. So, you know, in Vancouver, the strata fees are way higher. You know, out in the valley, out in Chilliwack, that kind of thing, they tend to be a lot lower. So, so that's that, you guys. We'll take a quick 5-minute break here, and the time now I've got is 10:26. So I'll see you guys back at 10:31. Okay, thanks.
Ignore me.
Yeah, I clicked it. It doesn't work. It's okay. I'll sort it out.
Okay.
Okay. Couple more questions here that we saw come up in the chat. I have a client that bought in the Oaks. They got an amendment to the disclosure statement saying they entered into a master deposit protection contract, which allows deposits to be released to the developer and used for purposes related to the development. Anything we should be worried about or need to look into? Not at all. No way, shape, or form. Nothing to worry about. We're going to cover that in a little bit here. But basically, what the developer has done, and it's all strictly controlled through REDMA. But essentially, what the developer is doing is they've basically paid for an insurance policy against their own default. So once they have that in place with a government approved insurer, then they can use your client's deposits for expenses related to development, just like you said. If the developer was to go belly up, and I don't think those guys from the Oaks are, but if the developer was to go belly up, your client's deposits are insured. So a very common thing that's being done out there. It's very cheap money. I think that the amount that the developer pays is like 1% or something like that of that pays to the third party insurer. So it's a heck of a lot cheaper than a commercial construction loan. But absolutely nothing to be worried about. But very good question, that's for sure. And then what would you advise your clients if market changes when closing time comes, they're overpaying for current values? Well, I think that I don't know the context of the question. If your client made an agreement, that they need to honor it, right? So the market value of the unit when they go to close is irrelevant. They made an agreement, they need to honor it. If you're speaking specifically about something to the tune of appraisals not coming in where they need to be, that's all the more reason to, like I said, ensure they're getting one of those TD mortgages as a safety net, because the appraisals are done in advance. Like, I can't stress this to you guys enough. Every single one of those those TD approved mortgages that I've ever had for any development, it's always funded. I've never had an issue with them not closing on time or anything like that. So I don't know what else to tell you. If they intend to breach and walk away because the market's changed, they need to seek independent legal advice, because they're probably going to get sued. There's a couple of guys at one of our developments where that exact thing happened, and yeah, they're in the process of getting sued right now. So I think the biggest mistake that a lot of realtors make, or a lot of buyers make, is that they think when they write one of these deals, the only thing they have to lose is their deposit. And they need to understand that it is not just their deposit they stand to lose. And developers will go to great lengths to protect their other completions. So it's not like this particular developer that I'm speaking about. He's not going to make any money suing these people by the time he pays the lawyers. It's not going to be worth his time. But he's got hundreds of other completions throughout the Lower Mainland pending. And he needs to make sure that, the reputation is, the understanding out there is that if you don't close, you do get sued. So that sounds a little harsh, but I mean, I certainly, don't think that it's fair that people just, would walk away from a deal and leave their clients, leave the developer holding the bag. So, yeah, that's all I've got on that. So guys, what we're going to do now is we're going to go over one of our standard form contracts of purchase and sale. And I'll come back to the chat a little later on here and answer any questions you guys have. And then at the end, I don't know, Aman, are you able to turn people's microphones on and just let people just kind of jump in and ask any questions?
Yeah, they can do that themselves.
Okay. Whoa. It's like a futuristic echo thing. Okay, cool.
Right. That should work now.
Cool. So, Amon, I thought you had me set up so that I could do. Oh, there we go. Okay, I shouldn't have doubted you. What's going on here?
You all good there, Trevor?
I'm having a little technical difficulties here, Amon. Should have used Zoom.
You just try to share your screen there?
Yeah, but it's not letting me, buddy.
Just bottom right.
Oh, okay. Okay. Can all you guys see Sid Vicious here? With the spiky hair?
Yeah. Got it.
All right. So we're going to go into. So we'll go over one of our standard contracts of purchase and sale here really quick. And I'm just going to go, none of this stuff is a substitute for legal advice, and none of this stuff is by any means comprehensive. But what I'm trying to illustrate to you guys here is the importance of reading and understanding every word, every letter of this contract. And if you can't explain it to a 5-year-old, you don't understand it. Okay, so please, you guys, make sure that you're reading through this stuff. When I was a resale realtor, I'd always read it twice, and then I'd star or highlight stuff I still didn't understand, and or that maybe if I didn't understand the consequences of it. I just email it over to a lawyer that I had a relationship with, and just ask them to chat with me for 5 or 10 minutes. Most lawyers out there, if you give them a reasonable, good faith, hey, like we are sending you guys the file on completion, they'll have a quick look at it for you. Most of the guys in the legal community are pretty good about that. Okay. So just scrolling down here. So this is our standard form contract of purchase and sale. So you can ignore the red. The red is the stuff that gets changed from development to development. Okay. Just one thing to reference in here, guys, and you can use this in your contracts too, is you can see here it says like insert development city, and then in brackets it's the city. So what I've done is I've established what we call a proper noun within the contract. So now if this development was in Port Coquitlam, I don't have to say city of Port Coquitlam every time. I can just say the city, right? So with your guys' kits as well, same thing for your resale deals as well. You can set up your kits that way so that you're creating proper nouns in one section of it, and you don't have to constantly revise stuff and worry about mistakes, right? So scrolling down here, guys. So estimated completion date. The estimated should probably be in cap locks, especially if it's a condominium development. So with condominiums, you guys, you can lose 3 months for nothing, like for literally like trivial little things. So all of a sudden one trade gets behind, and the trade that was dependent on that guy finishing can't go and do his jobs, and then he goes to a different job site, but then he's not going to finish that job site at that job site for 10 days. And it just becomes this domino effect. So especially with condominiums, because most municipalities will require the entire building to be ready to occupy before anybody can take occupancy. With condominiums, you can lose 3 months for absolutely no reason at all. Townhomes are a little bit easier because you can get the occupancy permit block by block, right? But condos, yeah, it's read the thing in detail and explain to your clients what the actual date range is. There's usually like a 1 to 2 year date range that it'll be completed in. Okay. So just scrolling down here now, if you're ever looking at one of my contracts, you guys, the way I have this set up is that the only thing that changes from site to site is the first 2 pages of the contract. Everything else, because we've established all of these proper nouns, stays the same throughout. Okay. So the highlight items here, deposits, your clients are not earning interest on those deposits. So again, just bear that in mind if a client asks. The reason that we don't pay interest on the deposits is just that with all the paperwork associated with trying to report income and all of that kind of stuff for 1% interest or whatever it is in your client's deposit. It's not worth it for anybody. So unless it's some sort of a promotion, I've never seen deposit paid on interest for the benefit of the buyer. Okay. So this was the question that Armand had. This is pursuant to the Real Estate Development Marketing Act, the seller may, upon entering into an insurance contract with an approved insurer or other form of security agreement, cause the deposit to be released by the seller's solicitor to the seller to be used to pay costs incurred in the development of the development. I know that's terrible language, but I think that all make. If you guys have any other questions about that, please let me know. I was very surprised that was permitted when I was studying the Real Estate Development Marketing Act, because it is such a strict piece of legislation. It's a consumer protection piece of legislation, right? And it's quite strict. So I was very surprised by that. But when you look a little bit further into, the fact that these are third-party insurers, it does make sense. Okay. So the completion date, the buyer, just on that first pair there, the buyer will pay the balance of the purchase price by delivering a solicitor's trust check or bank draft to the seller's solicitor on the completion date. The completion date will be the date set in a completion notice, which will be delivered by the seller or the seller's agent or solicitor to the buyer or the buyer's solicitor when the seller determines the strata lot will be ready to be occupied, and blah, 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 blah. You'll notice there's absolutely no reference to that estimated completion date that's detailed on page one of the contract, or page 2, pardon me. And that's for good reason. So the only function that estimated completion date has is with respect to what's called the end date, commonly referred to as the drop dead date. And we'll go over that in a minute, okay? So this is what I was talking about here earlier, guys. When you're talking about your clients not giving notice to their current landlords, unless they have somewhere else to go. The notice of the completion date delivered, this is the highlighted section, delivered to the buyer or the buyer's solicitor may be based on the seller's estimate as to when the strata lot will be ready to be occupied and when said title to the strata lot will be issued by the land title office. Okay. So we don't typically know when we're going to get occupancy. We don't typically know exactly when we're going to get title, right? So, it's one of those things where, we're issuing this notice in anticipation that we're going to have it on a certain day and time. Okay. And then you can see down here a little further down, someone's got their microphone on. If you guys don't mind just double checking. There we go. Provided the seller gives the buyer or buyer's solicitor not less than 1 business day's notice of extended completion date. So I'm not going to read the whole para to you, but again, that's right in there that the completion date could change on 1 business day's notice. Okay. So again, I can't stress this enough to have this conversation with your clients. Okay. I got a contract one time, landed on my desk, and what the resale realtor, the guy representing the buyer, had actually done, I thought this was really cool. He had actually underlined a lot of this stuff in the contract and had his client initial it. Now, does underlining it and having the client initial it, does that change the meaning of the contract? I asked that question, and then I realized I can't see any of you guys. So I hope your answers are no. No, it doesn't change the meaning of the contract, but it creates a record that he told them about it. And it's also a customer service thing. I think that, 2 years go by, right? They don't remember all the conversations you guys had in during that hectic time that they're buying the home. And I think that it's really important that you bring these things to the client's attention, right? So, and document that you did it. Okay. It's important for your relationship with your client. Just something to bear in mind. Okay, you guys, the buyer hereby acknowledges and accepts that the completion notice may take the form of a spreadsheet outlining completion and move-in dates and times for their strata lot and other strata lots in the development. So just bear in mind, you guys, that for us in particular, we're not, every time the completion date changes, I'm not going to issue 90 different new letters, right? We just send one out. It has a big table on it. It says your completion dates as follows: strata lot X is X date. kind of thing. Okay. End date. So this is the only clause in the contract that ties in with that estimated completion date. If the completion date has not occurred on or before the date that is 24 months from the estimated completion date as described in section 3D of part 2 of this agreement, the end date, due to non-performance by the seller. Okay, that's an important distinction. Due to non-performance by the seller, all parties' rights and obligations under this agreement will cease, and neither party will have any further claim against one another whatsoever, including but not limited to any costs or expenses incurred by the buyer in obtaining alternate premises. Okay, so in plain language, if the completion date hasn't occurred from 2 years following that estimated completion date that we talked about, the contract merges is of no further force and effect. Okay, so that's an important term for you guys to understand and acknowledge and explain to your clients. Okay, there is, of course, a force majeure clause in here. I've been telling people for 15 years that force majeure was Latin. It's actually French, apparently. So it means act of God. And so what force majeure clauses typically state is that if there's a reason beyond the reasonable control of the developer for an extension, so a strike, a lockout, a labor dispute, climatic condition, COVID-19, that costs development of the building, costs, the construction timeline 6 months, the end date will be extended by 6 months. Okay, so again, make sure your clients understand what they're agreeing to, and just make sure you're watching those dates associated with the rights of rescission, with the building permit and the financing commitment. Okay. Scrolling down here, guys, possession, risk, and adjustment. The buyer acknowledges and accepts that while they will be granted permission or possession of the strata lot as described above, their move-in date and time, as determined in the sole discretion of the seller, may differ from their possession date due to elevator availability. So when we close these buildings out, we want the lawyers at a very minimum to be doing 10 completions a day, which if you talk to Danielle, she loves. And there's sites, I've heard of, it's not uncommon to hear of an entire tower doing the entire completions in, the space of about a week. I've heard stories of that as well. So, just bear in mind that your buyers may be completing, they may get possession the next day, but they may not actually be able to move in for a week or 2 weeks. Okay. And again, it's something that if you explain to them in advance, they're not going to be upset about. But if they find out about it on completion, yeah, they're going to be upset, especially if they gave notice to their landlord already. Okay. Another really important thing to remember, we actually had this come up recently where a realtor in the community sold an assignment in one of our buildings. The client actually, the assignee, the person that bought the contract, actually went into the building, which do not ever do that, by the way. She went into the building, walked into the unit she thought she bought because she bought the paper, and the floor plan was completely different from what she thought she was buying. What she didn't, she freaked out, like lost her mind. If the realtor had actually read the contract that she had bought, he would have read this section here, that the buyer acknowledges and accepts that the municipal address or portion thereof may differ from what is noted in this agreement. Should a requirement from the city or other government authority or other government or regulatory body require the same. So what will happen is that the architects will often assign unit numbers to these suites. And you may enter into a contract for 405, and then building permit comes around, the fire department looks at the way that you have the unit numbers laid out, and they say, no, we don't like it like that. We don't like them going crisscrossing across the hall. We want it in a counterclockwise loop or something like that. As you can imagine, that's extremely important to the fire department. So yeah, the unit numbers do change. So this lady had actually walked into the wrong unit and thought it was the unit she bought. And so two lessons there. One, read your contracts, and two, don't trespass on private property. Okay. Builder's lien holdback. This is something that should be in every single contract that you guys enter into, whether it's, a little house with a pickup truck builder, or you're buying, a condo at a polygon development. Okay. So the way builder's lien holdbacks work is that a certain percentage of the value of the improvements, I believe for strata, it's 7% of the value of the improvements, are held back in trust at the lawyer's office. The reason being that your buyer, let's say, for example, the plumber goes in and he installs a hot water tank. Hot water tanks are one of the last things to go into a unit, so that's perfect. So he goes in and he installs the hot water tank in the unit, and 3 days later, it's a really fast completion in this example. Let's say 10 days later, your client completes on the unit. The developer refuses to pay him. So now that unit is owned by your client, not the developer. That plumber goes and puts a lien on the unit. Well, he's got, I think it's something like 45 days from the day that the work was completed to put the lien on the unit. Okay. So that's why the money is held in trust for 55 days. So, you got this money sitting in trust at the lawyer's office. On the 55th day, the lawyers pull title, see if there's any liens. If there is a lien, they pay out the lien and then pay the balance. So if the plumber was owed $3,500 and there's 10 grand in there, they're going to pay the plumber $3,500, discharge the lien, and then they're going to pay the other $6,500 to the seller. If there's no liens, then they're just going to pay the whole 10 grand back to the seller. Okay. So that's how you guys your clients are protected against liens. If it's again, like a pickup truck builder, like a guy that's just doing one or two houses, he's not going to have his own contracts. You need to make sure that this is in the contract when you're drafting it. Okay. And by the way, REDMA does not apply to like single family detached homes. Okay. So, like if you're buying a detached home that's not stratified, it's most likely that that REDMA is not going to apply. And what that means is that developers, and I think Epic Homes used to do this, I don't know if they still do, but the deposit is paid directly to Epic Homes, and they use that money to build. So if if Epic Homes goes belly up, that money isn't insured. Okay, so it's very important that you make sure that money is held in trust if you can, or at least educate your clients about the risks associated with it. I don't think Epic Homes is going anywhere, but these smaller pickup truck guys, they'll slide that by. I mean, we've done entire developments, entire single family detached housing developments, where the deposit was paid directly to the developer, and I don't think there was one single realtor that caught it and demanded the money be put in trust. Just something to watch for, you guys. Okay. Moving on here. And that also means, pardon me, there's no right of rescission. So make sure you have conditions in the contract. Okay. Upgrades and included items. So just to paraphrase what this clause says here, and I think every pre-sale marketer should have this in there, but it's definitely in all of mine. And basically what it says is, if you agreed to pay for an upgrade in your contract and for some reason it's not able to be supplied to you on completion, you just get the money back for the upgrade. You don't get to not complete or be compensated for it or something like that. So just watch for that if you have clients, for example, that absolutely have to have 2 parking stalls. Okay. Because what happens, and I use the example of parking stalls because frequently we lose parking stalls. The mechanical components of the building were larger than expected, any number of reasons. So just bear that in mind, and either if it's in there, strike it from the contract. Better yet, insist that it be made a fundamental term of the contract that a second parking stall be provided. There's ways around it. Okay. This one here, this is a really, really important one, you guys. Entire agreement / representation. This agreement shall constitute the entire agreement between the seller and the buyer, and no representations, warranties, guarantees, marketing materials, product samples, provisos, or agreements made by any person or agent other than those contained in this agreement, and that would include the disclosure statement, all of which survive the completion date, shall be binding upon the parties hereto. What that means is all that marketing material, all those color boards, all that stuff that you saw in the presentation center mean two things: Jack and poop, and Jack already left town. Okay, so just bear in mind, your guys' contract, your client's contract is for the strata lot. Okay, those finishings, those if it showed a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, you're buying the strata lot. Okay, you're buying the 4 walls. Most reputable developers will, of course, make sure that that is what you're getting, and there are workarounds on that. But just you guys be conscious of that. Okay. Construction. So these big long clauses that you have in here, that you'll see this in every single pre-construction contract. We market these developments off of the development permit drawings. So if you remember, the development permit drawings are where we tell the city what we're going to build. As you can imagine, once a structural engineer, electrical engineer, the architects get more detailed into it, stuff does change. What you guys need to understand is that the building permit drawings can sometimes look different, quite a bit different from the development permit drawings. Okay, so just be aware of that. The final strata plan is governing. Okay, so it's just one of those things where you're going to need to read carefully what this clause says and what the limitations are regarding it. Okay, that being said, REDMA is going to protect your clients in the event that the unit is substantially smaller than what was advertised in the disclosure statement. Okay, but a lot of the times what happens is the marketing material is based on the development permit drawings, and nobody tells the marketing team when the building permit drawings come out and there's some substantial changes. And we've literally had situations where we found out at the walkthrough that there was a significant change, right? So we do educate our builders on the need to involve us in the building permit process, but there's only so much we can do, right? 14, severance. Again, this will be contained in most pre-construction contracts. All that it says is that if there's some part of the contract that's found to be unenforceable, that's the only part of the contract that's unenforceable. It doesn't void the entire agreement. Okay. Advertising, another very common clause that you'll see in a contract of purchase and sale. And what it basically says is that until the building is sold out, your client is not able to list to resell their unit after completion. Okay, so something very important to watch for and try to and make sure you're catching if you can. Okay. GST. So this is an important one for you guys to understand and make sure that you're reading through and understanding. If the unit is, if it's a newer condo in the suburbs, right? Your client is if they're owner occupiers, they're going to qualify for a GST rebate. So take the example of a $300,000 condo. That's now going to be 309.6. There's going to be 3.2% GST that's applicable on top of the purchase price, right? Not the full 5. The thing that people don't understand is that the full 5 is still payable. That whole amount still has to be paid. But what happens is that other 1.8%, in this example, the other $5,400, most pre-sale contracts will have the developer paying that on the buyer's behalf. And what happens is the buyer signs a little piece of paper saying that when that money does come back in the form of a rebate, it goes to the builder, not the buyer, because the buyer is the one that paid that in the first place. You can only do that with owner-occupier. You can't do it for your GST rebate if you're buying it to rent it out. So the challenge comes is if you don't have a clause in the contract that says this, the buyer is going to have to come up with that extra, again, in this example, $5,400 on close. And, that can obviously be a really big problem for a lot of buyers. And, I learned this the hard way when I was a resale realtor, because it wasn't one of the things that I checked. And what happened was I ended up having to basically loan my clients the $5,400 so that they could complete, on a promissory note, that when the rebate came back, they would pay the money back to me. And luckily they did. But yeah, that was a big mistake. And and at that time in my life, if it had been significantly more money than that, I might not have been in a position to loan them that money. So it could have been a problem, but luckily it did all work out. Okay. So if there's any questions on that, like I said, guys, just leave them in the chat and I'll try to explain it a little bit better. It's easier when you can draw it out, but unfortunately I can't do that here. So inspection. So most pre-sale contracts will discuss a walkthrough appointment. If you're the one drafting it, especially if it's a smaller builder, make sure that there's a holdback clause. With the bigger boys, they're not going to do a holdback clause. In fact, my contracts specifically say that there'll be no holdback for those deficiencies. And then just bear in mind what the remedy is in the event that there is a discrepancy or there's a dispute about the value or what constitutes a defect, what doesn't, kind of thing. Okay, so just be aware of the remedy and how that goes. In this case, in my contracts, if there's a disagreement between your buyer and the developer, the architect is the one that will determine whether or not it's a defect. Okay. Multiple interests. I hope my industry competitors are stealing this clause and using it. I'm going to be doing this job for probably another 20 years. At some point, we may sell the same unit to two people. So essentially what this clause states is that if that happens, the guy with the first contract gets to keep it, and then the next guy is going to get their deposit back plus 10% as liquidated damages, and everybody walks away. Okay. If I was representing a buyer in a development and I saw this clause, I would just ask the marketing team to just to double, triple check their records and make sure that there was no one else entitled to it, or seek to have it crossed out. But I will we don't accept any changes to our contracts whatsoever, you guys. And most pre-sale marketers, it's going to be the same way. So you're going to have to figure out a workaround. Okay. Assignment notice and assignment terms, with our new socialist overlords there, assignments have become a lot more difficult to do. And unfortunately, we have to report not just when an assignment occurs, but whether or not we've given permission for assignments or not. So this whole thing is it's become very like 1984-ish. When an assignment does occur, I actually have to get people's SIN numbers and that kind of thing. It's a whole thing. So, if your clients are buying to assign, then just prepare them for the fact that there's going to be a lot of paperwork on the back end. We'll of course help you guys with it. We've got a system set up for it where you just fill in the blanks, but it's still going to be it's still not as simple as a one-page letter like it used to be. Okay. And then superintendent's policy statement 5 and 6. So if these apply, they actually have to be in the contract of purchase and sale. Okay. Policy statement 5 is pertaining to a building permit, and policy statement 6 is pertaining to financing. And the way that I remember the difference between the two is that the government thinks that construction can happen without financing. So construction first, financing second. So I'm going to just stop sharing here, guys, really quick so that I can check the chat, and then we'll take another quick break and get back at her. Okay. Would you be able to email us the sample of the contract for pre-sale? Yeah, just email it to me, and just send me an email, and yeah, we'll be happy to send it off to you. But just bear in mind that they do change slightly site from site to site. So, don't read that one and then think that you can walk in, just walk in any PMG site and already know what the contracts say. Sometimes the individual lawyers representing the individual builders will uh, the individual lawyers representing the individual builders will want to tweak things. So, okay. Cool guys. So time now is 11:06. We'll come back at 11:15, and then there's just two more clauses that we don't use in ours, but I just want to go over with you guys. Just phantom mortgage clauses, and then we'll just open it up for anybody that has questions, and then we'll be done. Okay, so 11:15, we'll be back. Okay, guys. Any other questions? Anybody want to unmute themselves really quick on anything we just covered? Like I said, we'll have some time for that once we're done here. But if there's anything quick, guys, just chime in. Not all at once. Okay, great. So we'll go back to again. There's just one more section that I want to cover with you guys, and then we'll be done here. Okay. Okay, guys, so just take some time to read section 3.2 here, okay? And I'll give you guys a couple minutes on that, and then we'll talk about what all this stuff means, okay? Okay, guys, so I'm assuming most of you guys can read faster than I can. So what is this clause discussing? If the strata plan has not been registered by the completion date. So there's two things that need to happen in a stratified development for your clients to be able to move into their home. And they're covered by different elements of the different governmental authorities. So one of them is that there needs to be a title to the unit, obviously, right? There needs to be a title to transfer to your client. And the unit also has to have an occupancy permit, which is issued by the city. So titles are issued by the province, by a provincial authority, pardon me, and occupancy permits are issued by the independent municipalities. What can happen sometimes is that we have occupancy, but we don't have title. And, this can happen for any number of reasons, but needless to say, it does happen. And what this clause is discussing, it's frequently called a phantom mortgage clause. And what's essentially going to happen during this period where we have occupancy but we don't have title, is that if you read it, said the buyer will arrange to sign all documents required for completion. Okay, so that's term A. That's just the buyer's got to go in and sign all those documents. Term B, the buyer will, on or before the completion date, pay to his or her solicitor or notary public in trust sufficient funds, net of any expected mortgage proceeds, to be advanced. So they got to pay all their down payment, everything, in trust to the lawyer. Okay, representing the adjusted balance due to the seller in accordance with the approved seller statement of adjustments. Follow me so far? So obviously there's some stuff that the mortgage company, TD or BMO, is going to be paying to the seller on completion. And then the rest of those funds are going to come from your buyer. So what that clause is saying is that the funds that are net of what BMO or TD is providing, your client is going to place in trust with his lawyer, his or her lawyer. Okay. The buyer will instruct his or her solicitor to hold the purchase documents and the seller's sale proceeds in trust until the date designated by the seller, the new completion date. Okay. And on the new completion date, the purchase and sale will be completed as contemplated by this contract of purchase and sale, with the exception that the buyer shall also pay to the seller the amount of interest that would have accrued on any mortgage being granted by the buyer, as well as the accrued interest on the sale or sale proceeds. So that's the tricky part. So essentially what's happening here is the developer is triggering completion, say, on February 4th, and your client is getting possession on February 5th. But title doesn't actually get issued by Land Titles until, say, February 14th. Well, your client is going to not only pay their their deposit, their down payment as part of the sale proceeds, but they're also going to pay the amount of any interest that would have accrued during that 10 days had they had a mortgage in place. Okay, so again, it's one of those things where if you explain to the client on the front end, you don't get to live in the home for free. You've got to essentially pay the seller rent for every day that you're in there. But the plus side is that you get in your home sooner. It's a very reasonable thing to expect. But there's been cases. I remember seeing the story of a woman in Toronto that walked into a sales center, didn't have a realtor represent her, and the way that the phantom mortgage clause worked was that you had to make these interest payments every month. She didn't know that. She thought she was paying her mortgage, and the deal didn't actually complete for like 6 months, and she had no idea what was going on there. And of course, I don't have any sympathy for her. She could have hired the best realtor in Toronto to represent her for free, and she would have been aware of it. But again, it's just one of those things where all work is done in advance. If you explain this stuff to your clients on the front end, you're going to be saving yourself a lot of headaches down the road. Okay, so that's really everything that I wanted to cover, you guys. If you guys are welcome to put any questions you have into the chat, or you can turn your mics off and ask any questions you have. I'll know once I see the attendance start to drip down that it'll be time to shut this thing down. Okay, so go ahead, guys, if you have any questions. Okay, great. Well, it doesn't sound like any questions. We have any questions here, guys. So I'm just going to thank you guys all for being here, and hopefully the next time I teach this class, it'll be in person. Definitely a lot more fun in person. Oh, I got one from Tripeg here. Okay, Tripeg, I'll wait for you here, brother. Trevor, you mentioned the term which protects the buyer if the unit is much shorter in size than advertised. What is this called? So this is a term of the Real Estate Development Marketing Act, that if there's a material change to the unit your client is buying, that it'll trigger a right of rescission. But just bear in mind that the material change it could be what floor it's on, it could be the size of it, and it has to be significant enough to be material to trigger the right of rescission. But that's enshrined in the Real Estate Development Marketing Act. It's not something that's within the contract of purchase and sale. That's all I've got on that. There are sometimes there's clauses that state, if it's more than 3%, if it's more than a 3% difference, then you get a per square foot discount kind of thing, proportionate to the purchase price you paid, kind of thing. So if you paid $600 a square foot and it's 1% difference, then you're going to get $600 for that entire 1% kind of thing. So anybody else, guys? If I was interested in selling development projects in the future, where would I start with acquiring the necessary knowledge? The best thing to do would just be to apply to start working, with someone that is marketing these sites. Unfortunately, there's no education. There's no schooling or anything like that for this specifically for this side of the business. You just want to kind of do OJT and learn as much as you could from people that are already doing it. Anything else, guys? If you have a question, just type in "I have a question," and then I'll make sure I wait. But if there's nothing else, okay. Well, thank you guys for being here, and we'll talk to you later.